This Week in the Boardroom, brought to you by NYSE Governance Services Corporate Board Member, along with Governance Knowledge Partners, the Center for Audit Quality, and Grant Thornton, and contributing partners, National Investor Relations Institute, and the Society of Corporate Secretaries and Governance Professionals.
Welcome to this edition of This Week in the Boardroom. I'm TK Kerstetter, Chairman of the NYSE Governance Services Corporate Board Member, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to the show. Actually, today's show is going to be very interesting because we have recently had an announcement of the introduction of a Shareholder-Director communication exchange called the Shareholder-Director Exchange. And with me today as our guest is someone that participated sort of in the groundswell movement of creating the exchange. So please welcome Linda Fayne Levinson, who happens to be a director on Hertz, Ingram Micro, Jacobs Engineering Group, NCR, and Western Union. And Linda, that is a lot of companies, so you're well versed as a director.
That I am.
So we know that shareholder engagement's a huge issue.
Right.
Okay, it has been for the last 2 years. We say that it's still going to be number one issue this coming year. Okay, along with things like cyber risk, you know, and so this is, you know, most people, this is the first introduction to the exchange. So just very quickly tell us about a little bit about the developmental process, what got you to the press release and the announcement of the protocol.
Okay. Directors in a lot of different groups, directors have been talking about how they should be communicating with shareholders. Activism happened, Say on Pay happened, the Harvard group that's talking about shareholder rights happened, and the media was taking on directors and management as saying, what are they doing? But directors weren't really talking directly to shareholders. So we started having a discussion, and Tapestry Networks convened a group of about a dozen or more of us, a lot of really big asset managers, institutional investors, and a bunch of directors for dinner one night to talk about, was this a real issue, and how did the shareholders feel? And it became quite clear that on certain issues, they wanted to talk to directors. We were also very clear that we did not want to step on the role of management. Management's role in talking to shareholders is very clear. It's about how are we doing, how are we executing, and directors should really not go anywhere near there. But on governance issue, that is our purview, and what we think is being transmitted secondhand, thirdhand. So we decided it was time to continue the discussion and see if we couldn't codify some way of addressing this communication. And that's how it happened.
So when you look at this program, it's built around something called the SDX protocol.
Right.
And that protocol appears to have 10 steps that sort of lead somebody through the process. And is that designed to be a roadmap for people, that they have something that beforehand nobody knew how to go through this process, and now you're presenting a roadmap?
Essentially, we're presenting a roadmap, and we're saying have a plan in case something comes up where you need to engage on either side of who should engage, how, what topics are appropriate, with which investors, and what you want to get out of it. Because the one thing investors said to us was, don't just come and chat. Have an issues, have something specific that you want to discuss. And actually, the other thing that we learned is success doesn't have to be you get someone to change your mind. Success really is you exchange views, you know what they think, they know what you think, and sometimes just listening is really important. So it's really, it's all common sense, but it's to have a plan and lead people through it.
I served on a panel with some investors, and I did chuckle when they said, don't just come and talk to us just to talk to us.
Right.
You know, we know that establishes a rapport which people feel that they need to do, but we really don't have time for just idle talk. So,
exactly.
Yeah, that's interesting. Well, I wish we had the time to go through the 10, and I would encourage our viewers to do that. And we'll show the website at the end of the show to make sure that they can go in and talk about those 10. Now, question for you. Is there a fee for this? Because I saw with the association, any fee to the people for using it?
There is no fee. We really consider this as a public good to start the conversation, and hope that boards and investors start thinking about this. And we think it'll evolve. You know, this is the first pass. As we go through this, we think we'll all learn things, and it will evolve as well.
Now, I have to admit to you, when this came out, I was a little surprised. One of the articles, and I tried to think this through, one of the articles, I think it might have been the New York Times, said that what was introduced was a tool to fight the Carl Icahns of the world. And I think that was probably a stretch, because what you're really designing is a way to improve communications. And their bent on it was that by doing this, if somebody's not proposing something good, you can communicate with all the shareholders and say this isn't good. So in that sense, I guess they're right, but they sort of blew this into, it really wasn't designed as a tool to fight Carl Icahn.
No, this is meant to deal with the spirit of the fact that investors are the people who vote for us, and therefore there should be a dialogue when there is something to talk about, and it's preventive. It's not, sometimes of course there's a crisis. You go and talk to investors because they hate your pay program, but sometimes it's just because you're changing something and you want to give them a heads up, not a heads up that goes against Rule FD, but you want to explain why you're changing a strategy, how you're thinking about succession, something that's appropriate. Strategy would probably be management, but something that's appropriate for directors. In the end, since when activists have a program, they try and get long-term investors on their side. If your long-term investors know you, maybe that will help, but that wasn't the intent. It might be a side benefit. Who knows?
Yeah.
We'll see.
So here's the big question. So this has been introduced.
Right.
We hope through this show and through other media outlets that people are going to be made aware. We have our conferences, and I'm sure that we're going to be asking some of your group to come so that we can have thought leadership. You know, around all that will help push this out further. But sort of, where do you see this now that that's been introduced? Do you see, you know, people coming on board? Do you see other people creating something similar or building on this? Or sort of, what do you think is going to happen going forward?
What we're hoping will happen is that in Nom and Gov committees and at boards, that the conversation will at least happen of, how do we feel about this? There will be some boards who will say, are you crazy? Directors talking to shareholders? And there'll be others where they'll have a plan in place where the corporate secretary will get involved and say, okay, we're actually going to think about when we say yes and when we say no in terms of accepting a request for a director to talk to a shareholder. We're going to have a plan in case of a crisis. And so we really want the conversation to start, and we hope that it will result in more appropriate engagement on specific issues, and that it will become a virtuous circle where positive feedback, both directions, will cause more of it to happen, but only where it is relevant, and certainly not where it invades the role of management. That's what we're hoping will happen. So if there are 10 more of these and it increases the conversation, that would be great, because the goal is more engagement. And the protocol is one way of getting there.
Yeah. Well, I have not had the chance to absorb the protocol. It's big enough.
Long.
Yeah, it's long enough that it does take some time
Yes.
to absorb. But I must salute all the people that served on the committees, because the fact that you were able to get them together and get something completed from all the factions that were part of the initial group is something to be commended for. So to that, and bringing up the issue, which can't hurt. Okay, so in that sense, please take back to all of the committee members that we sort of salute them for their efforts to get it to this point in time. I'm sure there'll be some other feedback coming along, but I view all that as good. Thank you for taking the time to do this. And let me give the address here so that people know where to go. And that is www.sdxprotocol.com.
Correct.
And we're going to put that up on the screen. And we want to thank you for, again, taking the time. And audience, that will conclude this edition of This Week in the Boardroom. We hope you enjoyed the show. We'll be back again next week to take another look at a critical topic that'll help you be a better board member or committee member. And we'll see you then.
Join us again next week for This Week in the Boardroom. Brought to you by NYSE Governance Services, Corporate Board Member, along with Governance Knowledge Partners, the Center for Audit Quality, and Grant Thornton, and contributing partners, National Investor Relations Institute, and the Society of Corporate Secretaries and Governance Professionals.